How's it going, Patreon folks? It's Patreon week for me, so you guys will be getting a lot of content this week. But today we're kicking it off with this really cool tutorial that I'm really excited about. We're going to be making this really beautiful loop. Now you can make it in Eevee. You can just follow along in Eevee. I'll be using Cycles, but both of these things work in both render engines. It will obviously look a little different. It looks more realistic in this engine, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you like it, you'll like it, and we're going to learn a lot of fun things. So this is the design that we're going to be making today. So let's go ahead and hop straight here into Blender and add in a plane. I'm going to hit S8, hit enter. Now I'm going to hit tab, right click, and I'm going to subdivide this guy, bring up this little dialog and hit 100. That is the max you can subdivide a plane. And we're going to go ahead, I'm going to hit Control A, Control A, and hit scale. Now, that little dialog I accidentally pulled up did remind me, maybe I should save this. So we're going to call this ROCKZZZ, enter, save Blender file. Now that we have this, we're going to go ahead and hit tab, hit U to unwrap, and just click unwrap. Very important to do that right now before we actually start making the rocks. I'm going to hit tilde key, which is right above the tab key for me, so I can click front. I'm going to hit A, and I'm going to click camera. So now we have that. I'm going to go ahead and bring my camera back to where I want it. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to hit 0. Now in my camera settings, I'm going to go here of my focal length to 24. And then I'll just bring it back a little bit more if you'd like by hitting G and middle click. So now we're going to actually start sculpting this mesh. Now before that, I do want to add a subdivision surface modifier just to make it a little more dense than it already is. Now, if you've never sculpted before, don't worry. I'm not a sculptor either. I practically never touch it. So it's really incredibly simple sculpting. We're going to go from object mode up here to sculpt mode. And we're going to stay in the default draw. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring my radius up by right clicking and bring my strength up. So now we're just going to be eyeballing some sculpts. Now that's too much for me. So I'm going to bring my, my strength down and my radius down. And we're going to go back to sculpting. So you can just go ahead and start bringing up your mesh and start making your rocks. This is just eyeballing it, just trying to see what you like. Maybe bring my strength up. And we are just making some random rocks, just making something we think looks cool and interesting. And we're going to bring that here, make this back area. There we go. Now it's starting to take shape of something that I would like to add some textures onto. This is just completely eyeballing it, playing with it. And now it's round, and that's because these are sort of rocks eroded by water, because we're going to be adding some water to the scene, so it makes sense. And we're going to be just bringing this up here. And yeah, so I liked the one I made in my original piece. So you can kind of go around, say, let me bring my radius down and get smaller details into these rocks. You don't need to actually add very minute, super small detail, because we're going to be adding that with our image textures. So now I'm happy with this sculpt. Really, I'm just done with it. So now we'll go from sculpt back to object mode, right click, shade smooth, and you can bring your levels viewport up to 2 if you'd like. Now let's go into adding our image textures. So we're going to go into cc0textures.com, and you can go ahead and explore all these assets. It's all completely free. Some of these textures go all the way up to 8K resolution. So it's just so much good stuff. Now I typed in rocks for the one that I picked, and I went in and picked a really dark one that I thought was really cool. Make sure you're picking one that'll work well on a flat mesh, not something with way too much displacement detail. So just go ahead and go through and just pick one that you think is good. You can even look up ground instead of rocks. Anything works really. Just go ahead and pick one that you think really speaks to you and that you really like. So we're going to go back into here. We're going to go click on shading, and we're going to have this thing here. Now let's go ahead and save this guy, save as, and I'm going to type this. I'm just going to call this tut. Now let's go ahead and click new. If you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, it comes with Blender by default. You'll hit Control T, and then I'm going to hit G to bring this back up. You'll want an image texture, mapping node, and texture coordinate with using the UV coordinate socket. I'm going to click open, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I downloaded the 8K resolution images. Some computers can't handle it. Mine can. I would probably assume yours can as well. It doesn't take too much power, but it does glitch out some people. So keep that in mind in case you're having problems. That may be why. I'm going to click on color as the initial color we're putting in there. Now we have our rocky texture placed on here, but we're not done. We need to add some more of those maps that they give us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this guy, hit Shift D, bring it down, plug the mapping into there, and we're going to get the roughness. So let's click on roughness, and we'll plug the alpha straight into the roughness to get a nice roughness map on this guy. So it's already looking so much more realistic. If you're an Eevee, this is really going to help you with realism. Now we have that. Now, if you are in Eevee, what you're going to want to do next for the displacement is just use a bump node, because displacement in the nodes does not work in Eevee. So I'll show you guys that, and then I'll show you guys for the Cycles users how we're going to displace this with a node. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to hit this guy here, hit G. I'm going to go Shift D, bring this guy down here, and we're going to pick the normal. So for you Eevee users who are going to be running this in Eevee, not running this in Cycles, use the normal, and then plug the color into the height, the normal into the normal, and you're going to get a little fun bumping going on. And then what I'm going to do is bring my strength down, and now you have pretty solid looking rock texture, completely nice in real time. If you don't like the scale of this, because these are fully tileable textures, I'm going to hit click 2, and I'm going to click 2, and now it's even smaller and it's tiled, and you have even smaller details. I'm going to keep it at 1 because I really like the large scale of this rock. Now, that's for Eevee users. Leave it at that. You're done with this texture. Now we're going to go over here to my Cycles user. So I'm going to click over to the Cycles render engine, and I'm going to be using GPU compute. Being that we're not going to be using every single feature Blender has to offer, you can actually use your optics cards if you have them. Otherwise, you're going to be switching over to CUDA, but regardless, we're going to be using Cycles now. So I'm going to hit Z and go to rendered view, and I'm going to pop this down so we get a little bit of lighting. So now we have this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this here, Shift A and get a displacement right there, plug displacement into displacement right there. Now I'm going to go over here, and I'm actually going to choose the displacement piece, plug the alpha into mid-level, and there we go. Nothing's going to happen. We need to go to our shader settings. We're going to scroll down here to settings, bump. We're going to do displacement and bump, and now we have some craziness going on. What I'm going to do is start playing with the mid-level scale right here. So right here, we're going to go 0.01, maybe 0.1. Try to figure out that exact number that's going to be the best displacement for here. Let's try 0.2. All right, so now we're getting these rocks kind of displaced here, and it adds a little bit more realism in these rocks that we're playing with. So what we're going to do is now just save our file and continue on. So what I'm going to do now is go back here to layout, and then I'm going to go to the rendered view, and we're going to add in our water. So Shift A, plane, S8, and I like how it is now. So I'm going to Control A, apply scale. We're going to go here to shading and shade this very, very quickly. So click new. I'm going to go here, and actually we're going to use metallic instead of transmission, just because I like the way the metallic reflects, especially with these night renders. It's giving you the illusion of water. It's not literally water, but that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and get a bump node, bring it down here, normal to normal. We're going to get a noise texture in OI, and plug the factor into the height. And we're going to bring in our roughness all the way down to 0. Bring that scale, and then bring that strength down till we get some nice water. And there you go. Now we have water, fully reflective water. which is what we want because we'll be using a night sky HDRI, which is what we're actually going to go get now. So I'm going to save my file here. I'm going to click this drop down and click Scene World, Scene Lights, and let's go here to hdrihaven.com. So we'll click over here to HDRI Haven, click on HDRIs, and we're going to type in night. So here in the search in IGHT, night, and look for a night sky HDRI. If I'm remembering correctly, believe I used this render here. And I'm going to click on the 4K. If you're seeing some pixelation when you look at your HDRI, you might want to click on the 8K. 4K seems pretty good for me, so I'm going to use it. So I put that HDRI on my desktop, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on my world, click on the color here, and click on environment texture, open, and I'm going to navigate to that HDRI's location, which is right here for me. So we'll click on the render view and see how we're looking. So this is what we're working with. We can go here back into shading, and then we can click on object to world to actually edit what that looks like. So we can actually edit that in Eevee. I'm going to click this drop down, scene lights, scene world, so we can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to hit the period key. I'm going to hit Control T so we can actually move this HDRI around, and I want to just be able to see the night sky. So I'm going to bring it up like this until it's out of my camera view. And now we just have stars, and that's what I'm looking for. So now we just have some stars reflecting, and we can go back here to object and layout. So now we have this beautiful night sky, water reflecting. Everything looks really great. Let's go ahead and start making that object that looks really, really cool for the scene. So what we're going to do here is hit Shift A, and we're going to get an icosphere or isosphere. I always forget what they're called. On subdivisions, bring it down to 1. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to bring it into this open space right about here. And then I'm going to bring it right here, kind of in the middle of this area. It's off to the left here, but that's just a nice composition. So I'm going to scale it up here. In my camera, I'm going to actually bring him up to better our composition, and then scale him some more till I kind of like his size within the whole scene. Control A, apply scale, tab, right click, subdivide it, and I'm going to subdivide it by 10. So what we're going to want to do is go to Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go here to Add-ons. And let's type in Cell Fracture, and click that right there. Now we're going to go hit F3 and type in Cell. Click on Quick Effects, Cell Fracture, and bring up this whole dialog. What you're going to want to do is bring up your noise to 1. Recursion, I'm going to bring my recursion up to 1 and kind of leave everything as is. If you want, you can bring your source limit to, let's see where are we at. You can bring this number up here to see how many cuts you want. I'm going to leave it at 250 because I like that. I'm going to click OK and let the Cell Fracture do its magic. Now it's going to leave the shell, so we're going to remove the shell once this thing is done. So now we have all these objects. Click around until you clicked that outer shell there, and just straight up delete it. Now we have all this. What we're going to want to do here is highlight the plane and the water, the rocks in the water, and hit the letter H. So I'm going to take this whole thing here, highlight it, hit M, New Collection, and call it Fracture. This is solely for organizational purposes. And then we're going to click on this collection. So now we have this whole thing happening right here. What I want to do is just go ahead and highlight all of these again. I'm going to go up here and click on individual origins, and I'm going to hit S and scale them all down a little bit. So now we can kind of see them in this manner. Now, one thing I want to do is actually parent all these to one object so I can rotate them and animate them. So I'm going to go ahead and Shift A and get an empty plane axis. So I'm going to hit Z and go to wireframe. I'm going to hit the tilde key, and then I'm going to hit G and put this guy straight in the middle. Now hit the tilde key and go to the top, hit G and put it right in the middle. So now we have this. Now I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of these, hit Control P, object. And so now we have this empty, and if we hit R, it moves all of them at once, and that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my plane and my two planes here back together, and we can go and check out the render now to see how we're looking. I'm going to go ahead and save my file currently, and now we have something really, really cool already to work with. So let's go ahead and start shading this guy here. We're going to go make something really, really quick. So I'm going to click New, and I'm going to make a metallic material. I'm going to hit Shift A, get a color ramp right here, plug that into the roughness, and then we're going to go ahead, Shift A, get a Musgrave texture. We're going to make a texture I've made probably 100 times here on Patreon, and we're going to use the object coordinate. I hit Control T on this Musgrave texture to get that mapping node. Musgrave to the height to the color ramp. I'm going to bring dimension to 0, detail up. So now we have this. I'm going to bring my scale at 0.3. And then the black, bring it closer to a gray. And now we have a nice texture going on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click on fracture, and then I'm going to go select objects, Control L to link, and click materials. And that's going to link all these objects together. Basically give all the objects the same material. Now we're going to work a little bit of magic here on this object to give it that beautiful glowing reflection like I had shown. So we're going to go ahead and fake reflections basically. So we're going to get a mix shader, plug that there, get an emission, EM in the search. I'm going to make it nice and blue or whatever color you'd like. Plug that into the next shader socket. Now I'm going to hit Shift A and get a color ramp. Plug the color ramp right here, and we're going to get a layer weight, LAY, and that's the secret to faking these reflections. We're going to get the facing here, and then what we're going to do is go from linear to constant, and then bring this in. And so now you can see how we're doing it. Now I'm going to give my strength at 100. And then now we have some wonderful fake reflections. So when I click on the empty and go to them to move it, look how cool that is. We get some awesome reflections without having to use like a point light, area light, really try to figure that out. We got it figured out for us. So now we have this whole thing figured out. I'm going to click here on the render view to see how it's checking out in cycles. We have this really, really cool piece. What I'm going to do now is a little bit of depth of field. Shift A, we're going to go ahead and get in a empty plane axis. I'm going to hit G and move this guy just around the scene until it's barely touching the front here. Actually, go into it a little bit. And then what we're going to do is click on the camera. I'm going to double click the empty here and call it focus. And then I need to bring it out of the fracture collection here. So it's called focus so that the camera can recognize it. So we can search it. Click on the camera, click on the green camera, depth of field. On focus object, we're going to click focus. And then I'm going to bring my blades to 20, my f-stop to 1. The smaller the f-stop, the stronger the depth of field. So we have a little bit of depth of field. I'm going to go 0.5 here on my depth of field. It gives you these nice depth of field on the stars. And we have all this fun stuff going on. I'm going to go ahead and actually bring my camera like this, bring it like that, something like this. Actually, what I can do is just go ahead and play with my focal length till I like it, something like this. And now we have that. I'm going to go ahead and actually bring my camera farther and closer down to the water. One thing I'm going to do is click on this little button with all the cards. Looks like a bunch of cards, layer properties, and we're going to click on denoising data. Now we're going to do a little bit of compositing. So what I'm going to do is render and render image. So now it's done rendering. We're going to click on compositing, click on use nodes, and I'm going to go at Shift A and click viewer. And we're going to click viewer here. And then I'm going to bring the image to image. I'm going to hold down Shift, left click, do that. And so that everything goes straight to the viewer and the composite so that it happens also when we render the animation itself. So one thing we're going to want to do is click on DE for denoise, go right in there, and you'll see it denoise it a little bit, but we want the more powerful denoising. So we're going to use this new denoising data. So we'll bring noisy image, noisy normal, noisy albedo, and let's render it once again. Okay, so we're back here in compositing. It's nicely denoised. We're gonna hit Shift A and get a GL glare node. Plug that there. And we're gonna get some craziness. We're gonna go from streaks to fog glow. So now we get some really nice fog glow. I'm gonna bring my mix down just a little bit so it's not quite so powerful, but you kind of get that Eevee bloom for those of you using cycles. Now you can get some nice Eevee looking bloom. And then the last thing we're gonna do is actually animate this guy. So I'm gonna keep it at 250 frames because it's a nice speed. We're gonna back arrow, not space, to frame 0. That's super, super important. Now go to edit, preferences. Goodness, I'm hitting every button but what I want to. Preferences. Now in animation here, make sure your default interpolation is on linear. Click that. Now let's go ahead and click on our empty, the one that is actually moving this guy. And then I'm going to click keyframe, go to frame 250, type in 360 so we get a looping 360 motion. Let's check out the Eevee view. And this is what you'll be getting in Eevee if you choose to use Eevee. It's giving us those really beautiful, really cool reflections. And if you're using cycles, you're going to get that beautiful cycles render. For those of you who want to render it out and save it, click this little printer icon. I would recommend, if you're rendering in cycles, use a PNG sequence. Though if you just want Blender to compile it into a MP4 video for you, you'll go to FFmpeg video, click where you want to save it, go to encoding, and click MP4 medium quality to perceptually lossless, render, and render animation, and you'll be done. And when you finish, you'll get something really, really nice and beautiful. Similar to this, you get these really nice reflections back here if you use cycles. That's one of the reasons why I loved it. And you get this nice water. So there you go. That's how you make that animation. Thank you guys for supporting me here on Patreon. Another tutorial is coming here before the end of the month. So thank you guys for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.